Hello and welcome to this week's Sew Along Sunday. Today we are going to be making this top. Got a sheared panel here, very relaxed on the shoulder, very quick, simple and easy to make. So the idea of the Sunday Sew Along is that every Sunday we're going to make an item of clothing that we don't need a pattern for. All you need is some fabric and a tape measure, and we're going to use your own measurements to create something simple, quick and easy. And then the perfect follow-alongs to get you into sewing, to build your confidence, build your skills, and before you know it, you'll have a full wardrobe of handmade clothes. Okay, so this is how we're going to work out the measurements for the top. So we're going to start with our waist measurement. So my waist measurement is 69 centimetres, and then we're going to times that by 1.5. So 69 times 1.5 is 103.5, and then we're going to divide that number by 2. So that gives us a total of 51.7 centimetres. So this is going to be the width of our fabric, and then the length is going to be from the top of the collarbone down to the natural waist. That's the length that I'm going for this top, but if you do want to have it longer to go down to the hips, then just measure from the top of the collarbone down to the hips, or whatever your desired length is. So for me, that was 36 centimetres. And then we're going to add 4 centimetres for seam allowance, because we're going to do 2 centimetres at the top and 2 centimetres at the bottom on the hem. We're going to turn it up by 1 centimetre and then again by 1. So in total we need 4 centimetres. And then I also like to add 5 centimetres just for ease on the upper half of the top, because we don't want it to be too tight under the armpit. So in total, that's going to be 36 centimetres plus 4 centimetres, which is 40, plus 5, 45 centimetres. So the length is going to be 45 centimetres. So in total, what we're going to do is we're going to cut a piece of fabric in a rectangle size, and it's going to be, for me, 51.7 centimetres, and then lengthwise it's going to be 45 centimetres. These measurements will depend on your calculations, but this is going to be the total for mine, and we're going to cut 2 pieces of material this size. So here is the working out. Okay, so now we're going to get our fabric, and we are going to cut 2 out. So if you fold the fabric right sides together. And then using a ruler in your measurements, you're then going to cut your material. I folded the fabric over, so I'm going to get 2. And I'm just going to measure. And I'm just using tailor's chalk to mark on. That's a perfect. I've just about got enough. I'm just going to pop a few pins in, just because we've cut on the fold and I don't want the fabric to move underneath. The idea is that they're fun, quick, simple makes, and we're not being perfectionists. We're just doing a fun, quick make with no pattern, and that is the whole idea, is to just let your skills run wild. Don't be a perfectionist and just get something made quick, fun and easy. I always find that these are the best projects, the ones that turn out the best. I always find when you're a perfectionist and you try and perfect every step of the way, that you just make so many mistakes because you're trying to be so perfect. And these ones always seem to go the best, the quickest, and turn out the best. So as I say, I'm just popping a few pins in just to make sure that that fabric holds while we're cutting around it. Just randomly putting them pins in. Okay, and then I'm going to use my fabric scissors, and I'm just going to cut along. Okay, so first things first, we're going to hem both the top and the bottom of the panels, just because if you've ever sheared fabric before, you'll know how much of a nightmare it is to try and hem the bottom and the top once you've started already shearing the fabric. So I like just to pop pins into my material just on the right side of the fabric so that I can identify, because they look quite similar on this material. So I just put a pin in and I know that the pin head is on the right side of the fabric. Okay, so we're going to start by turning the top and bottom over by 1 centimetre, pressing it at 1 centimetre, and then turning it again another 1 centimetre and pressing, and then we'll have that perfect finish. Okay, so making sure that you're pressing away from the front, from the right side of the fabric. And then I like to just bring my little tape measure and measure. Just do random checks as I'm going along. I am pretty good at eyeing it up now, but I like to just double check every so often. And again, we're just going to press by another centimetre. And then we're going to do the same again. Okay, so now we have pressed over by 1 centimetre and 1 centimetre again. We're now going to stitch these into place. So I'm using a straight stitch and I'm just going to move my stitch length to 3. And then we're just going to set off, we're going to back stitch at the start and finish. And then we're going to do the same again on the other side. Okay, we're going to do the same again for the other panel. Now we've done the top and the bottom hem, I'm now going to finish these side edges, and I'm just going to do it with an overlocker, but you can also do it on your standard machine with a zigzag stitch. Okay, now for the fun part, let's start shearing. So I've just got a little test piece of fabric here. Well, first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to get an empty bobbin case and some shearing elastic. Okay, so we're just going to start with our elastic thread and empty bobbin. And what you want to do is get the elastic thread, pop it through the hole here on the bobbin. And then you're going to wind it on by hand, but just be sure not to pull the elastic tight when you're doing it. You just want to keep it like this. Wind it on, and then I like to just keep it swapping sides just so that I can wind it on evenly. Oh. Like this. Okay, once the bobbin's full, just snip off the end, leaving quite a large tail behind. And then I also like to just snip off this bit as well. Okay, so what we're going to do when it comes to the machine is I've still got my standard polyester white thread on top. I'm just going to remove the bobbin, the standard thread. And then I'm going to put the new bobbin in. Make sure when you put the bobbin in, it is going anti-clockwise. The thread's going anti-clockwise towards you. Pop that in. Bobbin in the case, and then we're just going to move the hand wheel to go down and catch and then pull that through. Leave quite a long tail behind so it doesn't disappear when you set off shearing. And then the only thing we're going to change on the machine is I'm going to change the stitch length to 4, but all of my other settings I'm going to leave the exact same as they are usually. We're going to keep it on straight stitch. And then, as always, we need to use a test piece of fabric just to check that it's working okay. Okay, so that's perfect. Everything looks good with that. Stitched okay. So next what we're going to do is we're going to start stitching the shearing because we're doing it straight to the bottom of the hem. What I'm going to do is use this stitch line here, what I've done on the hem, as a guide for my first row, and then I'll use the side of the foot as my guide to ensure that the rows are even. But first, before we do that, we need to measure how far up we're going to do the shearing. So where it's going to go to, mine's going to go from the waist of the hem, and I want the shearing to finish just under my bust. So I'm going to use the bottom of the strap of my bra as a guide as to where I want the shearing to finish. So I'm just going to measure from just under the bust at the bottom of the bra strap down to the natural waist where I've got mine ending, which is 11 centimetres. So I'm just going to measure now 11 centimetres from the bottom. I'm going to mark it, and then I'm going to do the same on the other side, 11 centimetres up from the bottom of the hem, and then I'm going to do that the exact same for the other panel. Okay, so now we're going to start the shearing, and as I said, I'm going to start using the stitch line here on the hem as a guide, and I'm going to line the edge of my foot with that stitch, and then when I turn around to the other side I'll just carry on following that up. And then when I get to the edge here, just near where the overlock stitch is, I'm going to put my needle down with the hand wheel. I'm going to turn. I'm going to drop. I'm going to go up. 1, 2, 3, 4 turns of the hand wheel. And I'm going to lift the foot again. Turn around, and that is aligning perfectly with the other edge, with the opposite edge of the foot, so it'll be the exact same distance apart. And then again, I'm going to use that last line of stitching as my guide to go straight down. And then again, lift the wheel up, lift the foot up, use the hand wheel, drop it down, use the hand wheel to stitch forward 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then again, spin it back around with the foot up, and the edge of the foot will then align with your last row of stitching. And now I'm going to just continue doing that process all the way to these marks that I've lined, which marked 11 centimetres. I'm just going to carry on till there and then we will come back. Okay, so now we've sheared both panels, as you can see. Okay, so now we've sheared both panels up to the marks that we did. We are now going to sew up the side seams, but only up to, so we're going to align the bottom of the hem like this, and we're going to pop some pins in, and then we're just going to sew up the side seam with a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance just to the end of the shearing and the end of the hem on both sides. Okay, now I'm just going to put the bobbin, the standard polyester thread, back in the bobbin. And I'm just going to put the stitch length back down to 2.5, and then I'm going to sew down the side seams with a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. Same again on the other side. Okay, now what we're going to do with the part that we haven't sewn together yet, we're now going to press 0.5 centimetres, so about the same width of your overlock stitch or zigzag stitch, if you've done that, and then we're going to press it over again by 1 centimetre. And then we're going to do an edge stitch on the top, and we're going to do that on each one, on each panel, both sides. Okay, so now we've pressed all them 0.5 and then again by 1 on each one. We're now just going to go over and we're just going to do a nice little edge stitch on all of the edges. You can just do it with your standard foot, but I just like to use this overcast foot when I'm doing edge stitching, just because I find it's easier to use as a guide. But as I say, you can just use your standard foot. And then I just like to change the length of the stitch to around 3. Now I'm just going to change back to the standard foot. Okay, so now you should have something that looks like this with the finished edges. And what we're going to do now is making sure that the fabric is right sides together. We are going to pin together both top corners. The same again on the other side. We're going to get our ruler and tailor's chalk, and what we're going to do is we are going to measure down Measure down 5 centimetres from the top hem, make a mark, and then we're going to measure 5 centimetres along the top and make a mark. Now what we're going to do is put our ruler on, and from the mark that you've done here and the mark that you've done here, we're going to line them both up, and we're just going to make a mark straight across, like so. So I'll show you again for this side. So we're going to measure 5 centimetres from the top, put a mark, and then 5 centimetres down on the side seam, make a mark. Then we're going to get our ruler, and at the point of both, we're going to line them up. We're just going to go straight across with a line. And then what we're going to do is we're going to sew just a straight stitch on both of these diagonal lines. Stitch back down to 2.5. Same again for the other side. Remove the pins, and then using your quick scissors, you're just going to cut. Be careful not to cut into the sew line. Leave about 1 centimetre. Seam allowance, and just snip off both sides. And then we're just going to finish the edge with either your overlocker or your zigzag stitch. Turn it inside out. You should have something similar looking to this. We're going to give it all a press now. I'm just going to press the hem down, give it a press over the shearing as it just pulls it in a little bit more and tightens it. I'm just going to press the seams open and the seam allowance back on the shoulder parts here, and then we will have our final try-on look. Here is the finished top, perfect to wear with jeans, a nice maxi skirt, or a little pair of linen shorts. I really hope that you enjoyed today's Sunday sew along, and I'll be here again next week with a pattern free sew. I'd really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe, and I also have a simple sewing guide which is packed full of information if you're new to sewing or you're a beginner. I will put a link to it here so that you can have a look at that, and if you are new to sewing, it'd be a great place to start, especially on these Sunday sew along series.